Hello, and welcome to the Hidden Archives. Picture a whale rising through gray-blue water, breaking the surface with a slow exhale, sending a white cloud of breath into the air before slipping quietly below again. It is one of the most peaceful sights in nature, but it also raises a surprisingly deep question. If whales live in the water, why do they still have to come up to breathe? The same question follows dolphins, seals, sea lions, manatees, dugongs, and even sea turtles. These animals are part of a story called secondary aquatic evolution, lineages whose ancestors adapted to life on land, then later returned to the water. Tonight, we are not looking at a failure of evolution. We are looking at how evolution works with what a body already has.
Evolution does not begin with a blank page. It does not sit down like an engineer and design the perfect animal for some future ocean. Natural selection works more simply, and in many ways, more powerfully. It favors inherited changes that help an animal survive and reproduce right now, in the present generation. The ancestors of whales and dolphins were land mammals. The ancestors of seals and sea lions were also air-breathing mammals. By the time their descendants began spending more time in rivers, coasts, and open seas, lungs were already doing their job very well. A mammal that could surface, take a deep breath, dive, catch food, and return for more air had a workable solution. If one generation could dive a little longer, swim a little better, or store a little more oxygen, that was enough for selection to act on. There was no need for a sudden rebuilding of the body into something fish-like. In evolution, good enough can become extraordinary when it is refined over millions of years. What we see in marine mammals is not perfect engineering from scratch. It is practical adaptation, layer by layer, built on an inheritance from life on land. Gills may sound like the obvious solution, but they are not an easy upgrade. Air contains far more available oxygen than water, and it gives that oxygen up quickly inside the lungs. Water is a harder medium to breathe. It is denser, thicker, and more difficult to move across a delicate exchange surface. A fish solves this problem with gills that are perfectly suited to its size, body plan, metabolism, and long evolutionary history. But imagine trying to supply a large, warm-blooded mammal with enough oxygen from seawater. The gill surface would have to be enormous, thin, wet, and filled with blood vessels. It would also need a powerful pumping system to keep water moving, because water does not flow through breathing passages as easily as air. Then comes another challenge: salt and water balance. A gill is not just a breathing surface. It is also a place where the body meets the chemistry of the surrounding water. For a mammal in the sea, opening a huge, blood-rich surface to seawater would create serious problems of salt, water loss, and tissue protection. Gills are brilliant for fish, but they are not automatically better for a whale, a dolphin, or a seal. So marine mammals kept the lung and then made the rest of the body better at using it. A lung is remarkably efficient because it draws oxygen from air, where oxygen is concentrated and easy to exchange. The trick for a whale or seal is not to breathe underwater. The trick is to breathe deeply at the surface, store oxygen inside the body, and spend that oxygen slowly during a dive. Many diving mammals have unusually large blood volumes. Their blood carries high levels of hemoglobin, the molecule inside red blood cells that binds oxygen and moves it through the body. Their muscles are also rich in myoglobin, another oxygen-binding molecule, which stores oxygen directly where working muscles can use it. This is why the body of a diving mammal is not simply a machine holding its breath. It is an oxygen reservoir.
Air enters at the surface, but some of its oxygen is packed into blood and muscle for later use. The animal can then leave the surface without truly leaving air behind. It carries the benefits of the atmosphere down into the water, hidden in tissue, blood, and chemistry. Then, once underwater, the body shifts into a quieter mode. This is often called the mammalian diving response, and it is one of the most elegant parts of the story. When a seal or whale dives, the heart rate can slow, reducing how quickly oxygen is spent. Blood flow is carefully prioritized. The brain and heart remain protected, while less essential tissues receive less circulation for a time. In some divers, muscles can keep working partly on their own stored oxygen, using myoglobin as a local supply. Deep diving species have another remarkable adaptation. Under pressure, parts of the lung can collapse in a controlled way, helping reduce nitrogen absorption and lowering the risks that come from pressure changes. So the lung is not just a fragile leftover from land, it is part of a larger diving system. The breath at the surface, the oxygen in the blood, the oxygen in the muscles, the slowing heart, and the shifting circulation all work together. Breath holding, in this case, is not a limitation. It is a highly managed survival strategy, shaped by the demands of depth, time, and return. There is also a deeper historical reason these animals did not simply grow gills again. The ancestors of mammals lost functional gills very far back in evolutionary history. The body parts related to ancient gill arches did not disappear completely, but they were repurposed. In developing embryos, these structures help form jaws, tiny bones of the middle ear, parts of the throat and larynx, glands, blood vessels, and other essential anatomy. To recreate working gills, a mammal would not need one small mutation. It would need many developmental systems to change together, and the in-between stages would likely be harmful before they became useful. A half-built gill would not help much if it damaged the jaw, airway, circulation, or salt balance. Natural selection usually cannot favor a distant future benefit if the present step is dangerous. Evolution can modify old structures in astonishing ways, but it rarely rewinds complex systems exactly back to an ancient form. The path of least resistance was not to become fish again. It was to reshape mammal bodies around swimming, diving, and returning to the surface. And that is exactly what happened, again and again. When different animals returned to water, evolution repeatedly improved the parts that mattered most for movement and breath holding. Whales and dolphins became streamlined. Their forelimbs became flippers, their tails became powerful engines, and their nostrils shifted toward the top of the head as blowholes. Seals and sea lions followed another route, keeping more connection to land while turning their limbs into strong swimming tools. Manatees and dugongs became slow, heavy grazers of warm coastal waters, using paddle-like forelimbs and lungs that help with buoyancy. Sea turtles belong to a different reptilian lineage, but they show the same broad pattern, a return to aquatic life without giving up air breathing. Across these separate returns to the sea, the repeated answer was not gills. It was a streamlined body, efficient movement, better oxygen storage, and control over when and how oxygen was used. The sea shaped them profoundly, but it shaped them from the bodies they already had. So when we see a whale surface and breathe, we are not watching a weakness. We are watching the visible sign of a successful evolutionary bargain. Lungs stayed because they were already efficient. Gills would have been costly, difficult, and risky to redevelop. Oxygen storage, diving reflexes, and body design made air breathing work beautifully in water. tadpoles and axolotls are different stories because they retain aquatic larval traits. Marine mammals did not reinvent gills. The sea did not ask them to become fish again. It shaped them into something else. If you enjoyed this episode of The Hidden Archives, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment with the natural mystery you want us to explore next.